In the scorched heart of the Arizona desert, where the sun bled crimson into the canyons at dusk, a lone rider crested the ridge on a horse as weary as his soul. Jack Harlan, the cowboy whose name once echoed through dusty saloons like a half-forgotten ballad, pulled his Stetson low against the wind's mournful howl. His calloused hands gripped the reins not with the fire of youth, but with the quiet ache of a man who'd lost more than he'd ever claimed. 20 years he'd roamed these badlands, chasing cattle drives and fleeting fortunes, but tonight, as the stars pierced the velvet sky like accusatory eyes, Jack felt the weight of destiny pressing down harder than the saddle on his back. He wasn't searching for gold or glory anymore, just a reason to keep riding forward, away from the ghosts that whispered his failures in the night. It started as a mirage, or so he told himself. A flicker of movement amid the sagebrush, a shadow too deliberate to be wind-sculpted sand. Jack's horse, Old Thunder, snorted uneasily, ears pricked toward the arroyo below. Dismounting with the creak of leather and bone, Jack chambered around in his Winchester, his heart thudding a rhythm older than the red rock formations that cradled the valley. Bandits? Outlaws were thick as thorns out here, preying on stragglers like him. But as he edged closer, rifle raised, the shape resolved into something far more fragile, a girl, no more than 18, huddled against a boulder, her dark hair tangled with burrs and dust, her deerskin dress torn at the hem like a flag of surrender. She was Apache, that much was clear from the silver concho belt glinting faintly in the moonlight and the feather woven into her braid, a talisman against spirits, Jack reckoned, from stories his grandmother used to spin by the fire. Her eyes, wide and fierce as a hawk's, locked onto his, but there was no fear in them, only a weary defiance that twisted something deep in his chest. Water, she rasped in English laced with the lilt of her mother's tongue, her voice cracking like dry earth under boot. Jack froze. He'd seen enough border skirmishes in his day to know the hatred that simmered between ranchers and tribes, the scars of raids and reservations that never healed. But this girl wasn't a threat. She was a survivor, lips cracked from thirst, arms wrapped around knees drawn tight as if to hold her very spirit together. He lowered the rifle slowly, the metal warm from his grip. "Easy now," he murmured, holstering it with a gentleness he reserved for spooked colts. From his canteen, he poured a trickle into his bandana, pressing it to her forehead. She flinched at first, then leaned into it, her breath steadying like a foal finding its legs. "Name's Jack. You got one?" She hesitated, searching his face for the lie that so often came with a white man's kindness. "Ayanna," she finally whispered, the word carrying the weight of ancient canyons. "Lost. Days. Chased by shadows." Jack didn't press for details. Shadows could mean coyotes, men, or worse, the bottle demons that haunted his own dreams. Instead, he built a small fire with mesquite twigs, the flames dancing like hesitant storytellers, and shared his jerky and beans without a second thought. In that moment, under the indifferent stars, he wasn't the broken drifter anymore, he was just a man offering what little he had, and in her grateful nod, he glimpsed a spark of humanity that had long eluded him. As the night deepened, Ayanna's story unfolded in fragments, pieced together like a quilt of pain and resilience. Born to the White Mountain Apache, she'd grown up tending goats on reservation lands that shrank year by year under the ranchers' fences. Her father, a silversmith whose hands crafted beauty from hardship, had taught her the old ways, how to read the stars as maps, to heal with yarrow and sage, to listen when the wind carried warnings. But drought had come like a vengeful spirit, withering crops and igniting feuds. When raiders, faceless men in the employ of greedy landowners, burned her village to claim water rights, Ayanna fled into the desert, clutching only her father's last gift, a turquoise pendant etched with a crow, symbol of destiny's unyielding flight. Days blurred into delirium, she'd evaded patrols, scavenged prickly pear, but the shadows, those relentless pursuers, had worn her down to this skeletal defiance. Jack listened, poking at the fire with a stick, his own ghost stirring. He'd lost his wife, Eliza, to fever 10 years back, her laughter silenced in a sod house on the prairie. No children to carry her memory, just empty bottles and endless horizons. Kindness had become a foreign language to him, selflessness a luxury he couldn't afford amid the grind of survival. Yet here he was, sharing his last provisions with a stranger whose people he'd been taught to fear. "World's full of takers," he said gruffly, passing her the canteen again. "But you got fire in you, girl. Like that crow of yours, won't stay grounded." Ayana's lips curved in a faint smile, the first crack in her armor. "And you, cowboy? What chases you into the dark?" He chuckled, a sound rusty from disuse. "Regrets, mostly. And a horse too stubborn to quit." They fell into a companionable silence, the fire's glow painting their faces in gold. For the first time in years, Jack felt seen, not as the washed-up ranch hand, but as a thread in some larger weave. But dawn brought the unexpected turn, sharp as a rattler's strike. Hoofbeats thundered from the east, a posse of 5 riders cresting the ridge, their badges glinting like false promises. Apache scouts sighted near Harlan's claim, their leader bellowed, mistaking Ayana for the raider they'd been tracking. Guns drawn, they fanned out, eyes hard with the blind justice of the frontier. Jack's blood ran cold. He could ride away, leave her to their ropes and reckonings, self-preservation's oldest lie. But as Ayana shrank back, her hand clutching the pendant, a profound realization crashed over him like a canyon flash flood. This girl, lost and fierce, mirrored the boy he'd once been, full of dreams before the world beat them flat. Kindness wasn't weakness, it was the only rebellion against a land that devoured the soft-hearted. "She's no scout," he shouted, stepping between her and the barrels, his voice steady as canyon walls. "She's under my protection. Ride on, Marshal, or answer to me." The leader sneered, but Jack's stance, rifle loose but ready, eyes burning with unyielding resolve, held them at bay. Murmurs rippled through the posse, Jack Harlan, the lone wolf, drawing a line for an Apache girl. It was madness, or maybe something holier. They backed off, grumbling threats of warrants and watch lists, but the dust settled with Ayana unscathed. She stared at him, tears carving clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. "Why?" she breathed, the word a prayer and a puzzle. Jack shrugged, helping her to her feet. "Because destiny ain't about blood or borders, darlin'. It's about choosing light when the dark's easier." As they mounted Old Thunder together, her perched behind him, arms tentative around his waist, the desert stretched before them like an unwritten page. Little did Jack know, the real twist of fate was just awakening, a queen's crown hidden in the dust of a lost girl's path. Word count, 1248. This section builds the hook, introduces characters, weaves themes of kindness through shared vulnerability, and delivers the first unexpected turn with the posse confrontation, leading into realization. The trail to Jack's ramshackle cabin wound through Ocotillo thickets and forgotten petroglyphs, ancient etchings of hunters and spirits that seemed to watch their passage with knowing eyes. Ayana rode in silence at first, her body tense against the rhythm of the horse, but as the miles unspooled, she began to point out landmarks. There, the twisted juniper marks the place where Coyote tricked the stars into falling. Jack laughed, the sound surprising even him, and shared his own tall tales of ghost riders and gold-veined washes. In those hours, barriers crumbled like sun-baked adobe. She taught him to brew pine needle tea for aches, her fingers deft as they crushed needles in his battered tin cup. He showed her how to mend a spur strap with rawhide, his knots firm but gentle. It was a dance of small generosities, each act stitching their worlds together, Apache resilience meeting cowboy grit, in a tapestry neither had imagined. But the shadows Ayana spoke of weren't mere phantoms, they were men with motives as cold as winter arroyos. 2 days into their uneasy alliance, as they forded a shallow creek under a sky bruised with thunderheads, ambush struck like lightning. Bullets whined through the air, splintering cottonwood bark and sending Old Thunder rearing in panic. Jack dove from the saddle, dragging Ayana behind a boulder, his revolver barking return fire. 3 attackers, roughnecks with scarred faces and the stench of unwashed greed, flanked them, their leader a hulking brute with a scar bisecting his lip. "Hand over the squaw, Harlan," he snarled, recognizing Jack from old saloon brawls. "Boss says she's got something we want, that pretty bauble round her neck. Worth a fortune to the right collector." Ayana's hand flew to the turquoise pendant, her eyes widening in horror. Jack pieced it together in the chaos. Her father's work wasn't just art, it was a map, etched in subtle crowflight patterns, leading to a hidden spring on contested land, a lifeline of water that could tip the scales in the endless water wars. Raiders sought it to sell to the highest bidder, dooming her people to thirst. The realization hit Jack like a gut punch. He'd saved her from the posse, but now his presence painted a target on them both. Selflessness surged through him, fierce and unbidden. "Over my dead body," he growled, emptying his cylinder into the underbrush, buying them seconds to scramble toward the horses. In the frantic scramble, Ayana stumbled, a stray shot grazing her shoulder, blooming red through her dress. Jack's world narrowed to that wound, his hands pressing cloth to staunch the flow as bullets chipped stone around them. "Run," he urged, but she shook her head, fierce as ever. "No. Together." In a moment of profound clarity amid the gunfire's roar, she pressed the pendant into his palm. "The crow flies east from the forked mesa, 3 rises, then down. The spring, it's for my people. Promise me." Her words weren't surrender, they were trust, a selfless gift that pierced Jack's armored heart. He'd spent years hoarding scraps of life, fearing loss, but here was a girl, bleeding and cornered, offering her destiny to a stranger. Humanity's power, raw and radiant, ignited in him then, a refusal to let greed snuff out hope. With a bellow that echoed off the canyon walls, Jack fired his last round, then charged. Not with bullets, but with the weight of compassion's fury. He tackled the scarred leader, fists flying in a blur of knuckles and curses, buying Ayana time to mount and will old thunder around. The other two hesitated, stunned by the cowboy's sudden valor, and in that blink, she extended a hand. "Come." Jack surged up, the brute's knife glancing his ribs, but he vaulted into the saddle, spurring the horse into a gallop. Bullets chased them like angry hornets, but the canyon twisted mercifully, swallowing their pursuers in dust and distance. They rode until the thunder broke, rain lashing the earth in silver sheets, washing wounds and weariness alike. Holed up in a shallow cave, Ayana bound Jack's gash with strips from her dress, her touch steady despite the pain etching her face. "You fought for me," she said softly, as lightning framed her like a halo. "A white man, for an Apache girl. Why risk all?" Jack winced, but met her gaze. "Because seeing you give up that pendant, it woke something in me. Kindness ain't free, but it's the only thing that multiplies. You showed me that." Tears mingled with rain on her cheeks. "And you showed me, destiny isn't lost. It's chosen." Word of the skirmish spread like wildfire through trading posts and telegraph wires, twisting into legend, the cowboy and the Apache who outran death for a hidden spring. Jack, ever the wanderer, could have vanished into the Badlands, but Ayana's wound festered, demanding rest. In his cabin, a lean-to of weathered pine and dreams deferred, they tended each other through fevered nights. She carved feathers into the rafters with her knife, he strung a hammock from old ropes. Days blurred into weeks, and in that fragile sanctuary, love bloomed unexpected as desert rose after rain. Not the thunderous passion of dime novels, but a quiet flame, shared silences by the hearth, her laughter at his off-key harmonica tunes, his awe at her starlit prayers. Jack saw in her the queen she'd always been, fierce, selfless, a beacon amid barrenness. And she, in him, the cowboy whose heart proved wider than the horizon. The climax came on a morning gilded with promise, when riders arrived not with guns, but olive branches. Ayana's uncle, chief of the White Mountain Remnant, crested the hill on a painted pony, flanked by elders and a federal agent bearing papers. The pendant's secret had unraveled further, not just a spring, but proof of ancestral lands, stolen through forged deeds. Jack's stand had drawn eyes, reporters from Tucson, advocates from the East, turning whispers into a roar for justice. But it was Ayana's act, pressing the map into his hands, that sealed it. Her selflessness had forged alliances where hatred once ruled. As the agent unrolled surveys confirming the water rights, the chief clasped Jack's forearm, eyes shining. You guarded our daughter. Now, guard our future. In that circle of weathered faces, Apache and Cowboy, Red Man and White, Ayana stepped forward, her shoulder scarred but strong. With trembling hands, she placed the pendant around Jack's neck, the crow now etched with their shared path. You are my destiny, she declared, voice ringing clear as canyon echoes. And in a surge of generosity that bound them all, Jack deeded his claim to the tribe, the cabin becoming a way station for weary travelers of every stripe. It was no grand fortune, but an act of profound compassion, land not hoarded, but healed, water shared to quench old thirsts. As the sun dipped low, painting the mesa in fire, Jack and Ayana stood hand in hand, watching the riders depart with maps and hope. The lost girl had become the queen of her people's revival, and the cowboy, once adrift, her steadfast king. In the quiet that followed, Jack whispered, we chose light, darlin'. And look what it built. She smiled, leaning into him, the wind carrying their story onward. In a world quick to divide, by blood, by border, by bitterness, let this be the reminder, kindness is the truest crown, selflessness the spark that ignites destinies. One act of humanity can turn lost souls into legends, weaving hearts across divides into a tapestry of unbreakable hope. Ride on, with open hands and fiercer love, the horizon always bends toward the light.